Have you gone barking mad?
Yes, George, I have. Cluck, cluck, gibber, gibber, my old man's a mushroom, etc.
Welcome to episode 20 of the Blackadder podcast, where one of us is gone mad. Gibber, gibber.
The other one was mad all along.
How are things?
Not too bad, Gerry. How are you this week?
Grand.
It's a good place to be.
Certainly is.
Excited for this episode?
It's a big one.
It's a big one. It's not our last episode, but it's the last episode, if that makes sense.
The last proper episode.
Yeah.
Back and Forth came out after, I believe.
Yeah, it doesn't count though.
No. Yeah, I think this is one which will stand out for many people. The season itself did, and I think this ending is one that will last long in the memory of people.
Yeah, I mean, as comedy shows go, this is quite an emotional contribution, isn't it?
I think emotional is the right word. There are times when, there's a lump brought to the throat, although that may just be
The big stick that they're waving around.
Yeah. So unless you have anything you want to add before we begin...
No, let's get on with it.
Okay, in that case, crack on.
In Goodbyeee, Blackadder, Baldric and George once more contemplate the possibility of going over the top to death or glory as the war rages on. With their mortality suddenly much more readily apparent, the three men begin to open up, before a surprise visitor joins them for the final push. Is this the end for our heroes, or do they have one more trick up their sleeves?
Thank you, Ian. For the last time, we join the chaps in the trench, or in this case, just outside the trench.
I think Baldric was eating a cigarette.
Yeah. Potatoes. The rain is pouring, and George claims to be as bored as a pacifist pistol.
Blackadder's got this feeling.
Yeah, there's something in the air.
This excites George.
Well, he thought it was Baldric. But no, Blackadder is referring to the impending final big push, which has been confirmed via phone call.
Over the top at dawn.
Indeed. Blackadder realises the certainty of death. George is still hugely naive.
Yeah, it's almost a kind of denial, I think. He doesn't want to think about the other possibilities.
It's okay, you think it's denial? I don't think it is
No,
denial.
I don't think conscious denial. I think it's more like he's not wired in a way that would allow him to contemplate out with the immediate proximity of death, the fact that it's a possibility.
Yeah, you may be right, but Blackadder tries to explain the futility of this war to the perennially positive George.
It may be a bit risky, but it sure was bloomin' hell worth it, Governor.
How can it possibly be worth it? We've been sitting here since Christmas 1914, during which millions of men have died, and we've advanced no further than an asthmatic ant with some heavy shopping.
But this time, absolutely Pos will break through. It's ice cream in Berlin in 15 days.
Or ice cold in no man's land in 15 seconds. Now, the time has come to get out of this madness once and for all.
What madness is that?
Well, for God's sake, George, how long have you been in the army?
Well, me? Oh, I joined up straight away, sir. August the 4th, 1914. Oh, what a day that was. Myself and the rest of the fellows leapfrogging down to the Cambridge recruiting office and then playing tiddlywinks in the queue. We'd hammered Oxford's tiddlywinkers only the week before, and there we were, off to hammer the Boche. Crashingly superb bunch of blokes. Fine, clean-limbed. Even our acne had a strange nobility about it.
Yes, and how are all the boys now?
Oh, well, Jocko and the Badger bought it at the first Ypres, unfortunately. Quite a shock, that. I remember Bumfluff's housemaster wrote and told me that Sticky'd been out for a duck, and the Gubber had snitched a parcel sausage end and gone goose over stumps frog side.
Meaning?
I don't know, sir, but I read in the Times that they'd both been killed.
And Bumfluff himself?
Copped a packet at Gallipoli with the Aussies. So did Drippy and Strangely Brown.
the way that Hugh Laurie delivers those lines, you can hear the audience are enjoying it. But I don't have much doubt that that's probably a real situation. The people were actually signing up for their own death.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think that the propaganda machine and the history of the British conflict had certainly played a part. My understanding was that there was kids at underage, 14, 15, lying about how old they were in order to be able to join up to fight.
Yeah, I think it was presented as something. If you've ever watched the movie Starship Troopers, some of the listeners will have. The way that it's not the same sort of fight, but the way that being in the army is presented as something noble and glorious, and everyone should want to do it.
I think even today there is still that attitude.
I mean, I think Starship Troopers was a satire of that whole process.
I've not watched it.
Aye, it's worth looking at. It's quite a good
Is
movie.
is it a Paul Verhoeven?
Mm-hmm.
Is it? Okay.
I think so.
I'm more of a showgirls guy.
Okay.
Same director.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And Basic Instinct, did he not direct that?
Possibly.
Anyway, doesn't matter. We're a long way from Sharon Stone to the trenches.
Very long way.
In any case, as we heard there at the end of the clip, George realises that he is the only one of the Trinity tiddlers left, and accepts that a chap might get quite miffed about the whole thing if it wasn't for the thought of going over the top in the morning.
He's convinced that victory is inevitable.
Blackadder then describes the huge crisis that they find themselves in,
Yeah, they're going to die.
before requesting some implements for a suitably large plan.
Yeah, I think anyone who's seen our logo will have recognised this, but he wants 2 pencils and a pair of underpants.
Yeah, we've probably mentioned this before. That is certainly for me, the iconic image of Blackadder, certainly Blackadder 4.
Yeah, and he only looks that way for about a minute of the entire series.
So we cut to this iconic shot of Blackadder sitting with the underpants on his head and the pencils up his nose. What's his plan?
He's going to act as though he's gone insane, and then he'll have to be sent for treatment somewhere.
Invalided back home, I think he says.
Yeah. George is asked to send a runner to Melchett with the news.
He is. And at the same time, Baldric points out that he himself is a gormless idiot, but has never been sent back home.
That's true.
But Blackadder reminds him he has never said, "Whoa."
It's true. We've not heard that.
No.
We have heard him produce some wonderful concoctions in the kitchen.
We have, yeah. Blackadder wants a bit of practice, and he asks Baldric to ask him some simple questions. Can you remember what they were?
No.
Well, all the answers involve the word Wibble, and apparently he lives in Wibble, which is a place in Mars.
Were you convinced? Did he sound insane to you?
Not really, no.
No. They know him too well. They're not going to fall for this.
Don't think so.
Baldric has one of his tasty propositions to make at this stage.
What was that?
A cup of coffee.
Ah,
It's not really coffee.
why not?
It's mud.
Why?
There's no coffee.
Oh, okay.
They ran out of coffee quite some time ago. In fact, they've been drinking mud for many, many months. And the sugar's not really sugar.
What is it?
Dandruff. Blackadder refuses that, and he's asked if he would like some milk. It's not really milk.
No, it's a milk substitute.
Yes.
What's that?
Saliva. He's not going for this.
He's not.
George comes back with news.
He does. Blackadder tells him that he's off to Hartlepool to buy some exploding trousers.
George has a warning for Blackadder.
What's that?
Well, Melchett and Darling will be there soon, and they want to be convinced by this insanity.
Yes, I think George suggests that Blackadder better be very doolally. I think Blackadder's confident that he can pull this off.
Yeah, he says there's nothing more to do but sit there and wait.
And George suggests a game.
Blackadder's not interested.
What type of game is it?
I don't know.
Well, it's charades or songs like, "Whoops, Mrs. Miggins, you're sitting on my artichokes."
Is that the only mention of Mrs. Miggins in this series?
It is, yes.
Ah.
Blackadder thinks that doing bugger all might be more fun. I tend to agree.
I agree as well. Time passes.
Baldric has a question.
It's a long question.
Yes, but fortunately, not the one about where babies come from.
The thing is, the way I see it, these days there's a war on, right? And ages ago there wasn't a war on, right? So there must have been a moment when there not being a war on went away, right? And there being a war on came along. So what I want to know is, how did we get from the one case of affairs to the other case of affairs.
Do you mean, how did the war start?
Yeah.
The war started because of the vile Hun and his villainous empire building.
George, the British Empire at present covers a quarter of the globe, while the German Empire consists of a small sausage factory in Tanganyika. I hardly think that we can be entirely absolved from blame on the imperialistic front.
Oh, no, sir, absolutely not. Mad as a bicycle.
I heard that it started when a bloke called Archie Duke shot an ostrich because he was hungry.
I think you mean it started when the Archduke of Austro-Hungary got shot.
No, there was definitely an ostrich involved.
Well, possibly.
I think that clip again highlights it's a refreshing outlook on the war, on who, not responsible, but the different responsibilities that different parties had in it. Not quite as cut and dry as...
It's not black and white.
It's not good guy, bad guy necessarily.
No.
In any case, Blackadder goes on to explain about the two European superblocks, the British, the French and the Russians versus the Germans and Austro-Hungary, and how they were meant to act as deterrents to war.
That's right.
However, there was one tiny flaw in this plan.
What was that?
It was bollocks.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think these deterrents...
Well, it's something that you hear about it said about the European Union as well, that there's been no war since the European Union was set up. It's only existed for a very short period of time in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, same with nuclear deterrents. I'm not sure. I'm not convinced that's a...
There's no form of deterrent.
No. At this point, Melchett and Darling arrive outside, and George goes out to meet them and tell them of Blackadder's condition. What does Melchett want to know?
He wants to know, or at least he hopes, that Blackadder is genuinely mad and not just wearing his pants on his head with pencils up his nose like they did in the Sudan.
Yeah, where he had to shoot a platoon for trying this trick. Now, clearly having overheard this, Melchett enters to find Blackadder, informing Baldric about how not to pretend to be mad, and himself pretending to be mad with excitement at the prospect of the big push.
Darling is disappointed.
Yes, but he's rightly suspicious. However, Melchett refers to Blackadder as the hero of Umboto Gorge, and is as sane as himself. But
it's interesting that Umboto Gorge wasn't brought up before now.
Yeah.
But anyway, it works for this story.
Darling asks Blackadder if that would be the same Umboto Gorge where they massacred the peace-loving pygmies and stole all of their fruit. What does Blackadder say?
Says it's very different. It's the other Umboto Gorge.
Before offering him a coffee.
Delightful.
Can you remember what Darling wanted in his coffee?
Milk and sugar.
3 lumps. And to make it extra milky.
Yes.
But even Blackadder draws the line at Baldric procuring chocolate sprinkles for the top.
No.
How do you think he would have achieved that? How would you achieve it?
It would just be like sprinkles of dirt. Maybe sand.
Sand won't pass as chocolate.
Well, neither what you're thinking of.
How do you know what I'm thinking of?
I'm just guessing.
Let's move on.
George is still looking forward to the push.
Yes, and Melchett tries to boost the spirit of all of his men by recalling a rugby match that he won against Harrow, only for Blackadder to point out what?
Yeah, there was no machine guns involved, but this gives Melchett an idea. He's going to submit this to the Board of Rugby Union when he gets back to London.
He then asks Baldric if he is looking forward to licking the Frenchies. Darling has to point out that they will not be licking the Frenchies, but the Germans. Yeah, and Melchett tells him to stop being disgusting and that he wouldn't lick a German if he was glazed with honey. Now, Baldric then says that he loves his country, but not the king, as he has been told by his mother never to trust a man with a beard. How does Melchett respond to this?
Much like we saw Stephen Fry do in the previous season's final episode, he just delivers a swift punch to the jaw.
Knocks him out. Melchett then wishes them luck and bemoans the fact that he won't be with them for the big push.
But he's got a proposition for George.
Yes, he can get him out of there because of his connections, isn't it?
Yes. Well, that suggests that you asked me before we recorded this whether I thought he knew what he was doing to Darling.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that he's offering George a a way out maybe suggests that he did.
Yeah, we can get to that, but yeah.
Anyway, Melchit's pleased when George refuses the trip to headquarters and chastises Darling for spitting out his coffee.
After they have gone, Blackadder tells George that he is the one who is mad for refusing this offer. But George, he's not interested. He can't wait to get stuck into the Bosch.
Yeah, he's looking forward to the push, even though Blackadder points out they'll be cut to ribbons by machine gun fire before they even get to do anything interesting. Baldrick's going to cheer everybody up, though.
How?
He's got some poetry. He's written some poems about the war.
What's his first one?
War?
Okay. Can you remember it?
It's along these lines. Hear the words I sing. War's a horrid thing. So I sing, sing, sing. Ding, a ling, a ling.
I've heard worse.
Yeah? Well, some of the actual First World War poetry is worse.
George claps at this, but Blackadder reviews it by saying that it started bad, tailed off in the middle, and the less said about the end, the better.
Baldrick's got another effort called the German Guns.
Yes, and he recites it, even after the threat of a bayonet through the neck. Go on then, let's hear it.
Okay, it goes boom, boom, boom.
Come on in, no, sorry. Put a bit of effort into this. A performance, please.
Boom, 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 boom. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, boom, boom.
I did not realise that we had Brian Blessed in the house.
Well, you wanted my projection.
At this, stressed Blackadder claims he needs to get out of the place and allows Baldrick to air his cunning plan for old time's sakes. Can you remember what the cunning plan was?
Just call Earl Haig and ask him to get out of it.
Blackadder, as you would imagine, begins slating this plan until something clicks.
Yeah, he doesn't specify, but he's going to contact Earl Haig, I believe.
Yeah, he doesn't specify what the plan might be, but I think he does mention that he met Haig once 20 years ago. So it would seem that he has something over him.
Yeah, it's presently 3:30 a.m, so he's going to wait to call at 5:45.
Why? That's what I never understood. Why leave it to the last minute?
Haig will be sleeping.
Okay.
Does it remind you of the one where he was going to be executed earlier in the season?
Yes. Blackadder is now more relaxed, and he decides to pack for his exit. And as he does, George and Baldrick have a little chat.
You know, I won't half miss you chaps after the war.
Don't worry, Lieutenant. I'll come visit you.
Oh, will you really? Oh, bravo, yes. Jump into the old jalopy and come down and stay in the country. We can relive the old times.
What? Dig a hole in the garden, fill it with water, and get your gamekeeper to shoot at us all day?
You know, that's the thing I don't really understand about you, Captain. You know, I mean, you're a professional soldier, and yet sometimes you sound as if you very well haven't enjoyed soldiering at all.
Well, you see, George, I did like it. Back in the old days, when the prerequisite of a British campaign was that the enemy should, under no circumstances, carry guns. Even spears made us think twice. The kind of people we like to fight were 2 feet tall and armed with dry grass.
Oh, now, come off it, sir. What about Mboto Gorge, for heaven's sake?
Yes, that was a bit of a nasty one. 10,000 Watusi warriors, armed to the teeth with kiwi fruit and guava hard. After the battle, instead of taking prisoners, we simply made a huge fruit salad. Now, when I joined up, I never imagined anything as awful as this war. I'd had 15 years of military experience, perfecting the art of ordering a pink gin and saying, "Do you do it doggy doggy" in Swahili? And then suddenly, 4.5 million heavily armed Germans hove into view. It was a shock, I can tell you.
After this, Baldrick goes on to talk about what it was like when he joined.
Just before Christmas.
Yeah. And George reminds them of the time when both sides met during the Christmas truce of 1914.
Yes, I think they both advanced more in one piss-up than in the following 2.5 years of war.
I remember reading about this. It wasn't just one game that both sides, that would have been impossible.
Yeah.
Millions
of people,
millions of people, yeah. So I think these were dotted around the front lines. There was more than one particular game, I think.
It just goes to show that the people fighting this war weren't the people who had real stakes in it.
Of course not. They were pawns.
Yeah.
Disposable.
Utterly absurd and disgraceful.
Mm-hmm. Blackadder is then reminded of this football match and claims that he was never offside.
Yes. Baldrick's now feeling a bit melancholy.
Yes, he rues the pointlessness of what has happened since that particular time, and the fact that all his friends are now dead.
Albeit they were rodents and other animals.
There was one survivor, he thinks.
Was there?
Yeah.
Who's that?
Neville the fat hamster.
Right.
But Blackadder has bad news. It seems this is the final straw for Baldrick, who laments the killing and the war, and
He wants it to stop.
yeah, they just, why don't both sides just pack it all in?
George immediately accuses him of Bolshevism.
Yeah, he takes umbrage at this Conchi.
Yes.
Well, a Conchi must be a conscientious objector.
Yeah. He won't give him a reason why his plan's a bad plan.
No, he stutters and stammers when asked to try and explain why it would be bad. And obviously he can't because he's never thought about it. He's just following orders.
Yes, he just assumes that what he's told is right, and what is right is what the British want to achieve.
So we're over in headquarters, and in his pyjamas and moustache net. Did you like that?
It's very stylish.
It was. I wonder if that's a real thing. If you have a massive bushy, or back then, when it was a fashionable thing, a big bushy moustache, would you... Because women would have put hair nets on at night to keep it...
To avoid getting drooling in it and stuff.
Or, bed head, bed tash.
Who knows? It's probably so layered with Brill cream that it didn't move.
Yeah. In any case, he walks in on Darling, who is at his desk having a sleep, and then he starts to talk about the imminent push.
Yes, Darling is hoping the Germans might still be asleep, but Melchett has some personal words for him.
You know, over these last few years, I've come to think of you as a sort of son. Not a favourite son, of course. Lord, no. More a sort of illegitimate backstairs sort of sprog, you know. A sort of spotty squid that nobody really likes. But nonetheless, still fruit of my overactive loins.
Thank you, sir.
And I want to do what's best for you, darling. So I've given it a great deal of thought. And I want you to have this.
A postal order for 10 shillings.
Oh, no, sorry. Oh, that's my godson's wedding present. Here.
No, sir. This is a commission for the front lines.
Yes. I've been awfully selfish, darling, keeping you back here instead of letting you join in the fun and games. This will let you get to the front line immediately.
But, sir, I don't want to.
To leave me? I appreciate that, darling. But damn it, I'll just have to enter Berlin without someone to carry my feathery hat.
No, sir. I don't want to go into battle.
Without me? I know. But I'm too old, darling. I'm just going to have to sit this one out on the touchline with the half-time oranges and the fat, wheezy boys with a note from matron. While you young bloods link arms and go together for the glorious final scrum down.
No, sir. You're not listening, sir.
We touched on this, or I touched on this briefly earlier on, as long as you've not edited it out of the final version of the podcast. But Melchett earlier on gave George the opportunity to get out of this push by coming to headquarters, so he knows that there's a reason not to participate. So with that knowledge, it makes this seem a little bit sinister to me. He's deliberately sending Darling to his death.
Yes.
Or to his likely death.
Yeah. Sinister's a good word because it's not just being a buffoon.
Yeah.
This is someone who, even if he didn't consider him a close friend, he's worked with him, he's been his confidant, his aide for so long, that to do that to him, yeah, it's nasty.
Yeah.
But I thought that Tim McInerney's performance there was brilliant. It was an excellent piece of drama.
Definitely.
If it wasn't in a comedy, that could certainly have passed for any other. If that had been a straight,
Yes, if you didn't have the... Yes.
you could sense, you could feel his fear, his dread, his panic. It was top notch.
Yeah, very well done.
So anyway, yeah, do you think Melchett knew what he was doing?
He must. I mean, the only possibility you can think is he thinks there's a risk of death, but we're likely to win. So you get the glory and you get the action, and you're missing out, stuck here behind the desk. But I don't know. If that was what he actually thought, why would he be offering George the opportunity to back out of it?
Good point. So we hear Darling, he's begging not to be sent to the front line, but it's to no avail. I enjoyed this as well. We see the door open to the room, and there's a long shadow cast from the driver who's there to pick him up.
Is it Bob, or is they got a new driver?
It's a new driver. I don't think it's Bob. Yeah. To me, it represents a Grim Reaper. I'm not sure if that was intentional or not, but you see the shadow being cast over him as he's led away to this death.
Yeah.
It's nicely set up, nicely photographed.
Very well done. In the barracks, it's nearly morning, and it's time for Blackadder to call Haig.
Yes, where he reminds him of Umboto Gorge, where apparently he saved his life from a pygmy woman.
Haig's visibly uncomfortable with this conversation and agrees to help Blackadder out by pulling him away from this push, but he never wants to hear from him again.
Yeah, Blackadder's happy enough with that. I think he casually refers to him as Dougie or Dougie.
Yeah. And then we get what must have been a heart-sinking moment for Blackadder.
What happens?
Well, Haig's help is to tell him to put underpants on his head and pencils up his nose and pretend to be mad, and they'll let him off.
Yeah, and at this, he slams down the phone, leaving Blackadder to say, I think the phrase rhymes with clucking bell.
Yeah.
He realises that was his last chance.
Yeah, it's too late now for anything else.
The phone rings again, and a desperate Blackadder answers it, assuming it to be Haig, or hoping that it's Haig. Alas, it is not.
It's Melchett,
informing him of a surprise that he has sent over for him. And just then, Blackadder sees this surprise enter.
Yeah, it's Darling. Now, this phone call, on top of what we just discussed, does he think he's doing Blackadder a favour by sending Darling to die with him?
Well, see,
it's like at least Darling's not getting away with it.
Yeah, that sort of supports your view that Melchett knew what he was doing. So, does he have more respect? Well, we heard earlier in the episode there that he does respect Blackadder because of Umboto Gorge. So does he think that Blackadder will appreciate this pencil pusher being sent to fight with him?
Well, maybe that's what he's thinking. Maybe the earlier conversation made him think, this hero is going to go to his death while this wet blanket sits behind a table and mocks him.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I can do something about that. And then he just plays it off with some buffoonery.
Yeah. And these final few moments of the season are presented, the balance is just right. There's no overt jokes or humour. There are times we laugh or they hear the audience laugh. But even Blackadder doesn't think it's appropriate to joke with Darling or to tease him or taunt him or about what's going to happen. They're all in this together.
Yeah.
And I think that it could easily have been played where Blackadder takes delight in Darling being there, but there's none of that.
No. Finally, George is starting to come around to the reality of the situation.
Yes, I think it's starting to sink in.
Really, this is brave, splendid, and noble. Sir?
Yes, Lieutenant?
I'm scared, sir.
I'm scared too, sir.
I mean, I'm the last of the tiddly-winking leapfroggers from the golden summer of 1914. I don't want to die. Really, not over keen on dying at all, sir.
How are you feeling, darling?
Not all that good, Blackadder. Rather hoped I'd get through the whole show. Go back to work at Pratt & Sons. Keep wicket for the Croydon gentleman. Married Doris. Made a note in my diary on the way here. Simply says, bugger.
Well, quite. Come on, let's move.
Fix bayonets!
Don't forget your stick, Lieutenant.
Rather, sir. Wouldn't want to face a machine gun without this.
You mentioned this earlier, you hear the audience laughing, but it's not funny.
No, I think you sometimes get this at a stage play where the audience aren't necessarily sure how to react, how they're meant to react, and you sometimes hear parts of an audience giggle and laugh thinking that's what they're meant to do. And in fairness, there was an edge of humour there. The reference to his surname to Darling and the "oh bugger" line. But it wasn't played for big laughs. And I think that that little last monologue there we heard from Darling, it did a very good job of just summarising the fact that these were just ordinary guys. They've been sent away here, they were hoping to get back and just go on with things. They weren't the elite aristocracy. They wanted to get back and play some cricket and marry their girlfriends and work in a factory.
Yeah.
And I thought it was just it was played fantastically well. This last, the last few moments here.
I think you could feel what they were feeling, and I mean, obviously not what the actual soldiers would have felt, but it's not a bad effort at reproducing that sort of dread and despair almost.
Yeah, the noises in the background, you heard the bombs and the shells going off. That was just in the background there. You don't normally hear that. There isn't normally that soundtrack.
Yeah.
But that was dropped in here, which again helped to set the mood and the tone and the atmosphere. And they go outside.
Yeah, and there's a lull in those sounds.
Yes, and at this, I think is it George or is it Baldric grasps at the possibility of some sort of hope here at the
Both
war.
of them do, yeah.
Yeah, but no, the war is not at an end. Why has it went silent?
They're just ready for the push now. Mm-hmm. And the British planes have stopped shooting because they don't want to hit their own people.
Yeah.
They don't worry about that so much nowadays. They shoot their own people quite happily.
As they approach the ladder, Baldric has a final plan. Blackadder asks if it is as cunning as a fox who has just been appointed Professor of Cunning at Oxford University.
That's quite an iconic line, actually.
Yeah, it is. Baldric says yes, but has no time to explain it. What does Blackadder say?
Well, it couldn't have been worse than his plan to pretend he's mad, because who's going to notice another mad person around there?
Another nice line.
Yeah.
Blackadder not having a go at Baldric, which is what you would expect.
Absolutely.
Whistles are blown and our friends charge over the top as the film transitions to slow motion and the theme tune plays very slowly and mournfully before we see them disappear into black and white.
Yeah.
What happens next?
It transitions to a field of poppies at the end.
In colour.
In colour. And that's the sort of iconic final moments of the series.
We hear birds tweeting. So it's quite a powerful ending, certainly for a comedy show.
Definitely.
And I think this is why, I think this episode, that I've said before this season, but I think this episode elevates the entire show to a different level.
Yeah, it's a different thing altogether.
But it's got a message, hasn't it? It's not just about the comedy. Then every episode and every season has had a message. There's some sort of satire there. But I think this is one, I mentioned before, I think it hits home harder just because of the time frame.
Yeah,
and the
absolutely,
subject matter.
People watching it, a lot of them will have had relatives who were alive at the time of the war.
Enjoy the episode.
Yeah, it's different from the other ones, but it was a good episode. It was well made, it was well written, it was well performed.
Certainly. It was first aired on the 2nd of November 1989. We've obviously discussed all of the stars, but we've got Geoffrey Palmer this week as a guest.
He phoned in a part in this one.
Literally, yes. He played Field Marshal Haig. He was born in 1927. Most associated with As Time Goes By, Butterflies, A Fish Called Wanda, Doctor Who, Clockwise, Fawlty Towers. Do you remember him in that?
Not off the top of my head.
A Kipper and the Corpse.
Yeah, I would need to watch them again. It's been a while since I watched Fawlty Towers.
Ah, perhaps we should do that.
Strokes beard.
He was also in The Last Song, The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin, The Avengers, Paddington, and Tomorrow Never Dies. He was awarded an OBE in 2005. Okay, do you have any trivia for us? I think you've got some, haven't you?
Well, there's lots of things that we could talk about. We mentioned, obviously, early in the series that there was some sort of tension on set during this entire run. I think there was a quote from Rowan Atkinson at the time that this went out that said it's a shame that the audience is enjoying the show the most when the people involved are enjoying it the least. Which is quite sad.
Sometimes you have to suffer for your art.
Maybe. It does kind of suggest they might not be making much more of this, despite the rumours that keep going around. The iconic final scene, group effort, a lot of folk contributed to that. I don't think it was in the original script. It wasn't planned. I think they took the footage that they could get on the last day of filming, as I recall from what I'd read. And then they gradually or quickly, I don't suppose it really matters too much, but they had ideas added, slowed it down, black and white, fade to poppies, and it came together very nicely because I think it is remembered as one of the best ends to a series.
Yeah, definitely. I think what happened was that when they were running, it didn't look natural. It didn't look convincing. It didn't have the gravitas that the ending deserved. I think they were running some sort of rubber.
Yeah, and they only had a very short distance to run in as well.
Yeah, so they couldn't they're on a small studio stage.
Yeah.
So I think that the slowing it down was a fortunate necessity.
Yeah. I read some comments from Ben Elton. I think he'd been contacted by his uncle, possibly, around at the time this series started to air, criticising him for being involved in this show, which was attacking the British military. But he was defensive at the time, and quite rightly so, because I think it has been shown over the course of the 6 episodes that it's not at all the soldiers that are the butt of the joke here.
No.
And it is, in fact, a powerful satire of the people who you might think deserve it in this circumstance.
Without a doubt. Is that you? Anything else?
I could say other things, but we'll leave it for now.
Okay, what can I add? The title, Goodbyeee, was based on a First World War song by R.P. Weston and Bert Lee. There was obviously no closing credits to this episode.
No.
And the ending itself topped a 2004 poll in the UK for the best ever ending to a show.
The one other point I would like to make in the trivia section, this show's actually been used by the BBC as part of Armistice Day programming in the past, such as its impact being and its recognition as something that is a valid part of the conversation about remembrance and about the First World War. And I believe it's also been used in schools for history classes.
Understandable. Apparently, the original ending had all 4 protagonists being shot down, but with Blackadder only pretending and thus surviving.
That wouldn't have been as good.
No. So they changed it to the ambiguous ending that we do have. So perhaps someone did survive. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't think that really matters. That's not the story that they're telling. Isn't the story of these soldiers so much as the soldiers, many of whom did die.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a favourite line this week?
So many. Let's see, what am I going to pick for this week?
Well, you're thinking I'm going to go with, it rhymes with clucking hell.
Yeah, I might go with the entirety of the German guns. I think that was quite a good one.
Yeah. I'd also like to mention Baldrake's question about how the war started. That was a good one we heard in the clip, yeah.
Definitely.
Next time, Ian, what are we doing?
I think we're going back to where it all began.
Yes.
Well, not quite.
No, not the original pilot, but the foretelling, episode 1 of season 1 of The Blackadder.
So those of you who have been asking us about this, who have been waiting patiently for many months, it's coming next time.
Yep, that should be interesting.
Hopefully.
I think it'll be a good contrast between the characters we've came to recognise.
Yeah, I don't even remember watching it, so I'm going to have to refresh my memory very thoroughly.
Well, that's us then. Until next time.
Cheerio.
Bye-bye.